Okay.
All right, just let me know when to
Recording
start.
in
Okay, you can go
progress.
ahead.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the Louisiana State Board of Social Work Examiners Supervision Committee meeting. Today is Thursday, April 11th, 2024. I want to start off just by making an announcement that you all may not be able to see us right now. You will hear voices. This is because we believe that the storm may have impacted our ability for the camera to actually see who's speaking. And so what I'm going to ask is that all members of this committee announce their name when I do the roll call, and then whenever we are engaging in conversations, try your best to say your name before you speak, so that the public has the opportunity to hear who's speaking. So again, we thank you for your grace and mercy as we are still meeting in publicly at the Louisiana State Board of Social Work Examiners office in Baton Rouge. So my name is Dr. Hyacinth McKee. I am the chair of the Supervision Committee. To my right is
Jana Signorelli,
and then
Edgar Gidry.
Katie Brown, Parker Robinson, Sarah Banks, Angela Suits.
and then Emily D'Angelo, our administrator, is present at the meeting. And so today, folks, the agenda was posted 24 hours in advance. It can be located on the website, the LABSWE website. Registration in advance was also made public via Constant Contact. Individuals are encouraged to register in order to receive their continuing education credit. You will receive a email regarding continuing education credit will be sent within 30 days following the meeting. Public comment period will be permitted for each agenda item requiring a vote from the committee. Members of the public who wish to provide public comment must use the raise hand function to be recognized by the chair. Any one person may provide public comment only once per agenda item. Public comments are limited to 2 minutes per speaker. Public comments are limited to the item being considered. The chair may disregard or terminate any public comment that does not comply with this paragraph. If you're unable to attend the meeting but wish to make a public comment, those comments were needed to be emailed to Sarah Banks, sarah.banks@labsw.org. The email should have been received by close of day prior to this meeting. Attendees that's attending the meeting can obtain general continuing education hours. And again, as I stated earlier, an email regarding continuing education credit will be sent within 30 days following the meeting. So with that being said, I will now open the floor for any public comment pertaining to items listed on the agenda.
No hands raised.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no hands raised, now I will entertain a motion regarding the agenda set forth today.
A motion.
It's been moved by Katie Brown to approve the agenda for today, second by Parker Robertson. Any public comment to this motion? Any objections or abstentions? Hearing none, agenda is approved as written. Now I'll entertain a motion regarding the minutes of the February 23rd, 2024 Supervision Committee meeting.
Motion to accept.
It's been moved by Edgar Guidry to accept the minutes. Is there a second? Second by Angela Seeds. Any public comment pertaining to the motion?
No.
Any objections or abstentions? All right, hearing none, motion carries. All right, y'all, next item on the agenda is the status on the proposed legislation for supervision. So I will say to you all that on Tuesday, April 9th, we were in attendance. When I say we, myself and Emily D'Angelo were both in attendance at the state capitol to review and be there and present for the House Bill 865, which provides relative to virtual social work supervision. I am here to share with you all, if you are not aware, the bill was favorably accepted by the Health and Welfare Committee with some amendments, and it has passed the Health and Welfare Committee, and now it's on its way to the full floor. So we are not aware of when it will be heard, but Emily and I were both in attendance there, along with the president of NESW, LA, along with the Baton Rouge representative from NESW as well, were in attendance. And so, so if you need any more information regarding House Bill 865, go on to the legislative website. It's all there. Any questions pertaining to that? Okay, all right. Next item on the agenda is our report on deliverables. And so we mentioned at the last meeting, we were going to circle back and just kind of allow our other committee members to share their work as it relates to what we decided to work on as committees. And we have a brief report from Edgar on supervisees' rights and responsibilities.
Yeah, I think the last time we met and did this, we changed a lot, so it looks pretty good. There were just a couple of things I wanted to ask about. The new supervision contract shall be submitted by the supervisee within 60 days of the change when the supervisor changes employment. I have a question. If you keep the same supervisor, why do you need to do another contract? You know, like I'm supervising somebody now who changed jobs. We have not changed. I know she has to put in a change for herself, but I asked that question. I got a request to do an evaluation, and it's certainly it's confusing because if you do an evaluation, it's like it closes out the whole case. And I just said, why do I need to do another one? Because I'm continuing supervision with her. I'm not changing the supervisor. The supervisor is not changing. So I recommend that as a change. You know, if you keep the same supervisor.
Can you like add an addendum or an amendment, something to the contract? Like, because I think that's the only thing that changes, right, is what is initially in the contract is the information of who their employer is.
Right, the responsibilities of the position and all that. That actually got us in trouble with one of my supervisees too. And it just shouldn't be the case. If we're constant, the job is changing, we have a vehicle to handle that, and that's just looking and doing another update on the job.
Right.
Well, on the supervision contract, the agency supervisor is also required to sign. So when they change jobs, there's going to be a new agency
Right.
supervisor. So all of that stuff is contained on that one form. And that's why they're asking for another one.
Is there a way to automate that? I'm wondering where we.
Or just a separate form.
I just
Like,
separate
if the contract is essentially the same, is what you're saying, like, if what your contract as supervisor, supervisee is the same, it's more of updating and having the agency supervisor sign off on that is.
And what I'm
Because
getting
this
at,
is Incorporated on the supervision contract for all three parties to sign.
Right.
but what I'm getting asked is for an evaluation, which doesn't make sense. I can't, I'm not finished evaluating her, and that's what I keep getting requested, an evaluation. And it's like, wait a minute. I'm keeping, I'm not, she's not through with supervision.
Mhm.
That was confusing.
And I
Em-
think-
Emily did clarify.
That,
with me, but I
yeah, it
asked
is confusing and it's the way the current program is set
Right.
up,
That's
which
good.
won't follow with the new program.
Okay,
Is it
good.
changing that kind of that progression a little bit? Do you think, in the new program, will it be a bit different?
Yes.
Okay.
So it's more about logistics right now with CERMI. Cause then, right prior to that, it would have been you're literally taking your same contract, changing your information for where the supervisor is working, or they are, right? And if there's nothing else in that contract that had to be changed, then they're signing off on it to their agency supervisor and sending it back. So it,
They also, remember the LMSW has to complete the employment verification form.
Right.
Yeah.
For
Right.
each job.
Right.
Yeah. So it's kind of tied to that, and that's how the agency supervisor does.
So
Right.
Hyacinth McKee here, y'all try your best. I mean, I know it's hard. Try to say your name before you, it's gonna be, you're not gonna remember this. I'm telling you, you're not, because it's not anybody's fault, but, and I hear you, it sounds like a ball of confusion. We've talked about this before the full board, and when you changes to the platform, that may not follow. But I'm wondering if we don't need all of these people signing off on things, I'm wondering if one individual would be the individual that attests that this individual is employed, that this individual, meets all the criteria. And I'm thinking that should be the BACS. I'm really leaning towards having a deeper conversation about not having all these employment verifications, and waiting on, a lot of this stuff has been, HR has not been
Yes.
doing what they needed to do.
Yes.
And they hold up the process for those LMSWs,
Right.
really. I mean, we do have some BACs that have done what they needed to do, and then we're waiting on HR if they change jobs. This is if they change jobs,
Right.
okay? So I'm wondering if the deeper conversation, this is Hyacinth speaking, would be to have that attestation be done by the BACs. Where the BACs themselves would say, this individual is entering in clinical supervision with me. I've already verified that she or he or they are employed, you know what I mean? And then that's that. That would be only for individuals who are seeking clinical supervision, right? But everyone else is not. They would still need to do that employment verification form and submit that to the board. I'm hoping that's a deeper conversation we can have
Yeah.
about that,
Yeah.
eliminating all these people with these sign offs.
This
Yes,
is Angela Seats. I just experienced that, and it's not just the ones who are actually, seeking employee or changing employees, it's also those who are completing supervision. That human resources is holding up that time, and they're asking me for an evaluation. I can't do it until I get that information. So I see what you're saying. I need to get the information from their human resource before, and the human resources may not be on site. It may be a corporation where human resources is located in another state, and they're just holding on to
That's right.
the information. So it is, time consuming, and it takes more, it really is a damper on the whole process, and the supervisee, the person who's ready to either start supervision or end supervision, is in limbo.
I agree. This is Edgar, and I agree with that. That's the problem I had, because now you're doing logistics. Now your corporate office is in another state.
Right.
You gotta wait for them. That's not a priority for them. They don't even know this person, so it ties it up. So it would make it easier, what you're saying, Hyacinth, about getting the BACs to go and verify that, and not go through all these channels. because
Yeah,
we're not
I mean, I
lying
just
about
see it as another barrier, right,
Yeah.
to practice, and so, and that might eliminate that whole, this piece that we're trying to figure that out,
her.
just for thought.
And this is Parker Robinson, and also I think that that's a nice safeguard. I externally supervise, and so I always make a practice of calling the internal supervisor. Just to say, hey, look, I am the person, here's my phone number. And this is just, you can go over that verification of the work, that document with them. This is what I understand that person is doing. Is that correct? And so we can sign off and say, we talked to the supervisor, Ms. or Mr. or
I like
whoever else.
Yeah.
And we attest, we made the call.
I
Yeah,
like
but
that.
this is Angela Seats. What you're saying is good, because I talked to the supervisors too, but what we're saying is to verify employment. It may not be the supervisor who is verifying on the job. It may be human resources, not the supervisor.
Yeah, I got
Yeah,
you.
that's what I mean. So I think, so it sounds like, and so Edgar, this is your piece, right? And so Sarah's taking notes and Emily's taking notes too, but if this is part of your report, make sure that's included in there because we need all of our reports for our final report. You know what I mean? So, so it sounds like we're all kind of saying the same thing. It should be one person to do the
I
attestation,
can
not
write
all.
up something that
For
we
any-
let y'all look at.
Yes,
Next
for
meeting.
individuals who are seeking clinical supervision. Okay, got it.
Sounds good.
All right, cool, Edgar.
Okay,
Thank you.
You're welcome. The other thing I had, I think it might be in the past, if that bill goes through, because she was talking about remote. The other thing I was just, on item I, it was, supervisor keeps accurate records of both the dates of supervision and blah, blah, blah. I was asking, can it be, do we have to keep a physical copy or certainly, whatever platform we use, can that count as your record, or do you have to keep a separate folder? I guess I'm just trying to get this straight.
I was about to look over to my JD, but anyway.
It dovetails- this is Gina, it dovetails into some of what I was gonna bring up
Uh-huh,
too.
so
That
good.
is one of my issues as well.
Okay, so good. So it's kind of leaning on the work too that Gina is, but keep that up front. Great question, Edgar, because we've had that before, you know, how long, and then how long do we keep this stuff? That was the other question, like how long do we have to keep that as well? So, all right, so that ties into Gina's work. Okay, let's keep that on. All right, Edgar.
That's the only thing I have for the session.
Okay, question about a little bit, I want to bring this to your attention too, Edgar, and because I know you are working on the piece as it relates to supervisees' rights and responsibilities. I know that we have had some supervisees ask about in terms of evaluation. Now, the BACs are required to evaluate the supervisees. But we have had supervisees, saying we, has been brought to our attention that supervisees also ask, is there a piece for them to give feedback on their experience with the supervisor?
That's a good point.
And so I think that, you know, that may be something that we may need to also incorporate in terms of, as we talk about evaluation, and allowing space for supervisees to have a comment section or something like that, on their experience with the supervisor. Also, in terms of the supervisee, as it relates to their rights and responsibilities, making sure, that in that contractual dialogue, and I'm looking at my JD, I love you. And that contractual dialogue, letting the LMSW, know what their rights are. Because some of our LMSW's licensees are not very clear on what their rights are in the relationship in terms of, okay, I didn't know that my contract needed to be submitted to the board within 60 days of the start of my supervision. And we've had like LMSWs come back a year or so later, like I'm gonna miss those I'm losing hours and all the time. What do you mean my contract wasn't submitted back? And so something in there to ensure that the LMSWs are aware of their rights and that some kind of notification, and that leans on to Angela with her platform, something that happens in a platform that dings to say, hey, contract hasn't been submitted yet. You know what I mean?
Right,
Like, you
right.
can't go to step 5 if step 1, 2, 3, and 4 hasn't been done, right?
That makes sense.
And to Katie, yes.
I missed the first part of what you're saying, who would be, for the LMSW to have that information, are you saying that the BAS would be reviewing that? Or that there's something laid out in the, prior to the contract or as part of that contract that states that 60 days?
Or I'm deferring to Gina. Good
This is
question.
Gina, and this is actually, my first point is right now it's ambiguous as to whose
Right.
responsibility it is. Bottom line, to ensure compliance with that rule, so it's the first thing that,
Yeah.
I intended to address.
Okay.
But going back to the evaluation, as it stands now, the evaluation is very clearly, the supervisor's either recommending, not recommending, or recommending with reservation as to whether or not this LMSW is ready for independent practice. And in all of my reviewings, that's the whole purpose of the evaluation, is the evaluation of the supervisory process. So if we're looking to consider something in terms of the supervisee's ability to evaluate, I'm not certain that it would be appropriate on that evaluation, because everyone I've looked at is very clear in terms of this recommendation
Yeah.
for independent practice.
That's a good point. So maybe not on that, but at least allowing space somewhere where the LMSW, even if it's a little comment section, I don't know where that would be, so I'm looking at Angela, it could be in our platform, I don't know. Or space for the LMSW to provide a statement of their experience of the supervisory, experience. So I don't know if it might go, Gina, like you said, to your point, on that,
Right.
where that goes,
I just
right?
wanted to point that
Yeah.
out, but I definitely think that's a wonderful idea, but I think we need to preserve that evaluation for what it's intended for.
So I'm hearing you think it should be preserved the way it is for what the full intent is, and then maybe in some
A
other
different
space,
avenue.
a different avenue, a different space to include that.
Let me
Okay.
ask you a question too. and
Yeah.
Sorry if I don't know this. This is Edgar. Let's say somebody, supervisee, terminates with the one supervisor. Let's say they move into another job and they're gonna get a new supervisor. I've heard throughout my career, the complaints where they had to almost beg for an evaluation to be completed. They couldn't get it, the person left, they wouldn't do it. Are there any repercussions for that supervisor who doesn't complete this form?
So some of that, we started to address some of that in 505, like the new one that we.
Okay.
507.
507. Yeah. Emily's so sweet. Oh, 507. All right, thank you, Emily. In 507, we started to address, and that's still some more work, right? That we have to develop what that looks like, but
Okay.
there is some more conversation needs to happen on what if the BACS doesn't comply. Unfortunately, we do have to address that.
Yeah.
Happened to me.
It but right,
Okay.
so people are looking for their needing their evaluations to move on.
So they
Okay.
can't start with a new supervisor, a new BAF until that evaluation is complete.
That evaluation has to
It
be
holds them up.
complete, because the evaluation is
Yeah.
gonna, right.
But like, if they're not done their hours, is that what you're saying? Like,
Yeah,
it held up?
This is Parker. I
Sorry.
got a new supervisee who was half the way through with somebody else, more
Right.
than halfway through, it doesn't matter. But we really couldn't start for a couple of months because she didn't finish and close out her process and do her hours and do her own thing, so we were waiting for a couple of months.
Well, this is Angela. I had a supervisee. I did not know she was in supervision with someone else. So I got all the information from Certificate to start everything, and it allowed me to put my information in. And finally, when I looked and reviewed her information and saw that she had more, I said, how are you having more information on your certificate? And she told me she was in supervision with someone else, and I actually called the board. I don't know if they remember. I called the board and asked about 2 supervisors at one time. Because I felt like that was overlapping and, it was, I don't know if she was trying to complete the hours, but I refused, I backed out and did an evaluation, but I didn't think that was right. And my second point I want to say about the evaluation is, and I don't know if this falls part of rights and responsibilities or not, but is there a way that the supervisor and the supervisee, maybe in the future, can halfway through do evaluation of each other? So it can be, that it won't be them saying, I didn't know, I had to do this, and I didn't know I wasn't prepared if they get a bad evaluation. So that supervisee will know, hey, I didn't know I need to improve on this part, and the supervisor have already discussed it with them and it's been evaluated. And I don't know if we can do that as far as halfway through, do a evaluation, so they'll know where they're at. That person will know where they're at and as far as being prepared.
I will say, Angela, this is Hyacinth, I will say in trainings that I've gotten, I'm picking on Edgar, but I've sat through some of his trainings and talking about, he does say, I'm picking on you, But he does say in there, because it's not written, doesn't mean you don't do it, right? It's assumed that you are doing that and that evaluation and that midstream. But to your point, Angela, are we looking at making sure that there are some safeguards where there is a point during the supervision that there is a dialogue? And I mean, and do we want an actual evaluation or could it be something in the platform that says, 6 months evaluation complete, like an attestation if it is. Because what I don't wanna do, because social workers are form people, right? Like, we are form people. Everything is, let's do a form. And it's like, how many trees, like, get some out my yard and make some paper. I mean, like, so we're form people, right? So what I really this is Tyson, I wanna try to also respect the, what's the word I'm looking for? The skills of the backs too, right? Like, so I don't wanna be like overarching as well, and overreaching, that's the word I'm looking for. So maybe if it's an attestation, to say that, hey, we've already did our midpoint and not to expect them to complete a form. And send another form up to the board if that's okay.
And this is Gina. I
Yeah,
think there, piggybacking on what you said, there's a difference between a recommendation and a requirement. Because when we
Yes.
start putting numerous requirements in, then it gets onerous.
And this is Parker, and supervisors, we have jobs, we do other things, we do all this stuff, and so this is not our whole focus to figure out the forms in the system. I mean, we do it, we take the responsibility, but it really has to be as streamlined as possible. I'm not a form person.
You're not a form person. Does anyone else need to say anything before I move on? Edgar, are you finished with your report?
Yes.
Okay, all right, and so, thank you, Edgar, for that, thank you for your work, and just, type up what you would like for us to include, and so when we finalize everything, we'll have it all together, okay? Thank you so much. All right, so now we're gonna move on to license platform with Angela. Okay, Angela, take it away.
All right, good morning, this is Angela. I do want to say, I started out comparing, Certainty to licensing platforms in Texas and Arkansas. And I got this wonderful email from Emily notifying me that, we will be changing to a new platform, which is wonderful. And, she asked if I minded, I incorporate this information, so I was like, yeah, yippee, so I'm gonna review this information that, she sent to me. It does have some questions on here, so please feel free to, chime in. But as far as supervision contracts, the most common problems, and that's what I was charged with looking at, what are some of the problems with certain, LMSW selects the wrong contract. This will not be an issue with the new platform. Thank God, because I do hear, I've spoken to several LMSWs, who select the wrong information. And it, again, delays time. And so that is one thing right there. LMSW selects the wrong contract. The way Certainty has it, where you go in, it's confusing when you go into the platform and you're not, if you're not aware of what to do, sometimes you may need someone to assist you, or you may be selecting LCSW platform, not knowing, because you see licensure. So even though it specifically says that, and just like Parker said, she don't like to read. I mean, she don't like forms. She don't like forms. She don't like forms. Let's be correct. I'm dead correct. She don't like forms. A lot of social workers don't like forms because we see so many forms. And a lot of times we go in and we clicking on things, and sometimes we're looking at all these forms and we're completing it and not realizing maybe it's the wrong form. So that's an issue there. But the other one would not be, the new platform would not be an issue as far as an LMSW selecting the wrong contract. It'll be more specific. LCSW best accepts invitation but does not complete it. That's an issue there also. It will be set up the same way with the new platform and should be easy to understand what is required. Based on my experience, there have been times where an LMSW did not inform me that it was emailed, and I didn't check the email within a certain time frame, and they had to go back in to serve me and reissue the invite, the invitation. So, Emily will have to, piggyback on that to let me know whether or not that's gonna be an issue with time frames as far as a new platform when the invitation is sent to the backs to, accept the invitation. Agency supervisor does not complete their portion timely. We already spoke about that. This is a pushback for agency supervisors who are not social workers. They can't resolve a new platform, and people are not licensed by LABSWE cannot be given access to the platform. So that's one thing about it, but as far as an agency supervisor not completing the portion timely, a lot of times it does depend on the agency supervisor, who that supervisor is. And I see a lot I work in hospitals and agencies with nurses as supervisors of, nurses and other disciplines as supervisors of social workers. And they do not understand the timeliness of, and the importance of that social worker getting this information back in a timely manner. And that's why when Parker said it's very important sometimes to speak to that agency supervisor, to let that agency supervisor know this is very important and this needs to be done time. And having that trusting relationship with that LMSW is really important to know that, hey, I can speak with your supervisor about making sure this information is
So Angela, just for a quick pause on that. So to go back to what Edgar is saying, if we would have this be just the backs being the person that would attest that the agency supervisor has been contacted, is that something? Can y'all hear me? Am I speaking?
No, this is,
Oh.
I'm saying good.
Good. I was wondering, that's what I'm wondering, so like that, see that three, that part about agency supervisors and clear. I'm really wanting us to consider removing that out, like, it's such a delay. So if we do, again, to what Edgar is saying and Gina, like, just not have that, like, have the backs be the person to apply the attestation. What you thinking, Angela?
I'm just thinking, I was reading what was in here. It said our suggestion is to revise the contract.
Right, I see that, yeah,
Yeah.
right, just saying it, right.
It's basically what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
So that is basically what, thumbs up,
Thumbs
that's
up.
what we'll be doing. Hoping the new platform, and so Emily has her finger up saying that's what's gonna happen. So that's
Just a
great.
thumbs up saying, yeah, that's a good thing.
Okay, any questions, comments on that for?
No, that's good.
Question real quick. So, right, if we're taking, this is Kate, if we're taking the agency supervisor out of it, don't we just have one contract then? There's no more this contract or that one, right? Because that's part of the confusion too. Wouldn't it just be, if it's just the BAS that's signing off on the contract, we don't need, right now there's like.
So this is Emily. So, the way I would think it should be set up is that you indicate on the contract
Right.
if you are the agency supervisor or you are not, you would
Right.
tell it on the same form and not have two different forms.
That's some of the confusion too, it seems like, is people picking the wrong form or allowing them to complete it for whatever reason.
Got it.
And I was gonna say that on the Texas form, I don't know how many people license in Texas, but it does have that agency supervisor or non-agency supervisor. So that is a good idea to include that on the form.
Angela,
Yeah.
this is Emily. Did you get copies of the forms that you looked at, like the one you just referenced from
I did
Texas?
not, but I can email them to you all, because I did have copies of them at first, but I don't have them with me.
Okay, because anything that the committee thinks how the new forms should be designed, I'd like to see.
Oh, great.
Super.
See
And
it.
that's something, thank you, Emily, that's something that we can put on our deliverables, right? We want to review those actual forms and make any additions, adjustments, corrections. Yeah, so that definitely is part of our deliverables. Really looking at those forms.
I will do that.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you, Emily.
So some questions for the committee to consider, and we spoke about this, is 60 days a reasonable time for submission? And the staff believe that submission time should not exceed 60 days at this time, but we were saying that it should be more than 60 days, isn't that what we said earlier?
No,
Should not exceed 60 days. Okay,
Yeah,
So,
should not
but-
exceed 60 days.
and that's what staff believes submission time should not exceed
Should not
60 days.
exceed 60 days. We think that, I'm not saying we,
There is a thought that.
there is a thought out there that 60 days is more than enough time to get the contracts completed. A committee,
This is
Right.
Gina, the forms now are very streamlined. The supervision contract requires minimal information. It's mostly contact information. You check off if you're on site or off. Each party reads their responsibilities, signs it and dates it. It is not onerous in any way. 60 days can be viewed as a very generous amount of time, given how streamlined the form is now.
so I think everybody's okay with the 60 days, Angela.
Do we think that it should be less than 60 days?
No, we're okay with the 60. Anybody okay? All right, all right.
Stuff comes up, I'm happy with the 60 days.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay, does LABSWE need to know the identity of the agency supervisor? We already agreed that the facts need to be, but does LABSW need to know?
I think there's no problem with indicating who the agency supervisor is through the attestation process, but we don't need a form from them. You know what I mean? Like, you know, we need to be able to see, the goal is, we need to make sure that the LMSW is employed. That's really what this is
Right.
about.
And you can
Right.
put who you spoke with.
Who you,
Right.
yeah.
Attest that I spoke
And
to
they work at
someone.
this, and they, you know, it confirms they work these amount of hours.
Yeah.
This is the agency supervisor.
This is Parker Robinson, I think that's really important, just because what came up in my head just then was, I actually had a supervisee that was being, I wouldn't say sexually harassed, but the supervisor was being inappropriate with her and calling it inappropriate times, and I just think, I had a record of who was, and I had met with him, but I think it's just important to know who's supervising.
Mhm.
And another person, should it be mandatory to have agency supervisors approval of the contract?
That's a good question. What's your thoughts on
Should
that?
it be mandatory?
To have the agency
Agency
supervisor approval of the contract.
I don't think so.
No.
This is Edgar. I mean, I look at it so many ways, especially if you're doing off-site. If they're not paying for the supervision, they don't get no say-so. That's my
No
point.
say so, no say so.
This is the professionals
Yes.
reaching out, because a lot of them are not paying for it. so they're
Yeah,
doing
people
their
are
own,
paying for it on their
you know,
own.
So I just think acknowledging that their work there is enough.
Yeah.
This is Parker, I think that we should contact them, we should know who they are, we should maybe talk to them, but one of the reasons people do external supervision is to get a global view of the functioning of their agency, that we would never say something detrimental about their agency, but we could say, you know, there are other ways to look at it, and the policy there may be based on the payment mechanism, or this or that. And so, I think it's important that the supervisee gets to choose how they do supervision.
I think the only, and the only thing I have seen is like, I have signed confidentiality agreements with
Mhm.
agents, because they go over their caseloads with them, so that's just standard, I think leave that to the backs, we should know that. And you're gonna share that, and they have always been comfortable with us signing that and saying, okay, in my experience, I haven't had any problems with that.
And, number 4, if the answer is to number 2 is no, see Rule 503C, which should the new contract be required if the agency supervisor changes? We've already discussed that when Erica was discussing that, and we were saying no. It should not be a new contract if the agency supervisor changes.
Well, this is Gina, and if that's the direction we're moving towards, with no for agency supervisor to acquiesce to the contract, then we would have to just remove that piece from the supervision contract, because right now it is a requirement.
Yeah, I hope y'all taking notes on this, because we're gonna have to circle back, you know, and really, like, before we finalize it, we're gonna look at this again, right? Just to make sure.
And that's why, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, no,
This is
Gina.
Gina, it was about to fly out my mind, and that's why whenever the agency supervisor changes, we currently require an update, it's because we currently require them to acquiesce to the process via their signature.
Mrs. Parker, and to Gina's point, something we need to think about is that if the agency supervisor changes and that is the supervisor, then that's a whole new contract.
Right.
So repeat that again, you said the agency supervisor changes.
Right. Should the agency supervisor who would be on the form as the agency supervisor, but that is also the box supervisor.
So my question to that, and we asked Ms. Nevin to think about that for, this is Angela, somebody said earlier, should there be an addendum to, instead of a whole new contract, an addendum where the new supervisor would actually sign off that, on that part, instead of a whole new contract?
This is Gina. I think that depends on whether or not we remove the requirement for them to sign. Because if we
Say that
remove,
they don't have to sign. and they
then
don't need
all of
to
this is
attest.
moved.
I don't need it.
So I think that's the issue on the table.
And maybe, this is that, if we keep that never having to sign another contract and say the same supervisor, we can actually put that, we attest that we talked to the agency supervisor, and if they change any other supervisors, if they change jobs, we will attest, we will commit to talk to them about this supervision. That could cover it all. You don't have to sign again.
So, Mrs. Katie, so to your point, what's on there right now is very minimal and it is that contact information. And so it would literally be changing, you're saying like, or we're saying either removing their information, or we're just saying we're attesting to, this is the agency, this is where they work, this is the supervisor. So if that changed and it was a new supervisor or a new job, we still, as of right now, would need a new contract. So the question is, do we keep that? It sounds like you would still need to have a new contract, not just a test.
This is Gina. It depends whether we want the agency supervisor to continue to acquiesce to the process, because that signature on that contract is their acquiescing to this procedure, this process that
Right.
we have in place. Oftentimes, there are many venues where social workers are not supervised by anyone in our field. They may be supervised by an educator, they may be supervised by a nurse, they may be supervised by a physician. And so, sometimes the role here to bridge that gap is explaining what we have in place, our licensing requirements, what this person is working towards and the procedure to get there. So there were several reasons to having that signature on the form, on the contract. So I think before we go any further, the true issue is, how do we want that procedure to take place? And do we want to tie it to the BAS on the contract? Because if we still want to have a signature and, the agency supervisor involved in that way, we can have the BAS supervision contract without that signature and maybe tie it to the employment verification form with the agency
right.
supervisor. That way the BAS and the LMSW don't have to continually change their contracts.
That's what I think.
That's the issue.
That is exactly what I'm thinking. I just think that
Yes.
we do not, and we're all saying, yes, we don't need the agency. So that's to me,
We
that's
need
a
that
barrier.
on
On a supervision contract, that's a
Right.
barrier. That's another barrier to, so.
Because
Some
that's
of
what
we
I'm
all
hearing
agree with
from
that.
them.
Okay.
It's more an updating process
Right,
than it
right.
is.
And that was my question, kind of like, do you just remove it then so that you don't have something you've signed
We
off on
cannot
and it
tie it
changed,
to that
right?
form. That way the BAS
Yeah.
and the LMSW they're not disrupted repeatedly
Right.
with things within the agency.
Right.
Correct. I think that once the employment is verified by the BACS and attested to by the BACS, I think that's sufficient. This is Hyacinth speaking. I think that's sufficient. And so whatever that looks like for us to do. Now, I do believe that if the LMSW changes employment
For jobs within an agency.
or jobs within an agency, then I think another attestation may be warranted. But I do not believe, to Gina's point, that we need to have that tied to the supervision contract, because it's another building.
So just like, is it, just like the backs will sign another attestation, they talk to the new supervisor?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's.
I just think
Sorry,
that
I
it-
don't know the contract.
It's good, I think
Yeah.
that's something for us to consider.
We should kiss, keep it simple.
I never heard that before, but I will be, it might be in the news. Okay, go ahead, Angela. We're doing
I was
good.
trying to change, to type what you all were saying.
That's all right, take your time. I know the packing and then we have, and then we'll of course yield the rest to Gina, the time, but she's got some stuff to do.
Okay, so I'm going to go through this with you, I don't need to teach more. Employment verification, we just talked about that, the suggestion that we had with that, being completed by the employee within 60 days. This is the beginning of supervision, data supervision, and the purpose of the verification of, that the LMSW does work, as a social work employee as defined by Rule 301 and confirm the beginning date. This is what's on the, of the employment. However, LMSWs are authorized to provide social work services on behalf of federal, state, and local government agencies on the contract basis. This is scope of practice, 2707B. Language for the employment verification needs to be revised to allow the verification that the LMSW is a contract employee, if they are a contract employee, because we see that a lot too. So the questions to consider for that is it reasonable to have this as a paper form that gets completed by the employer and uploaded by BACS? In other words, LMSW could alter the form before uploading that form, or should this be completed by the employer and the LMSW mails the original to the board office?
I had one of those, this is Parker, I had one of those, and I can't even remember how it worked, but I did see the form before. I can't remember how it worked, and it was with the serve me process, so I don't remember how it worked, but it worked. But it was very closely, the process was closely guided by our expertise in this office, because it was something I didn't know how to negotiate very well. I had never seen one before like that.
So it looks like, if the burden of employment verification burden, oh my goodness, I gotta watch that, but if is on the backs verifying, then the backs will still need something, right? To have for their records to, to confirm that this individual is, aligned with the scope of practice. So, yeah, I wanna hear your feedback on it. I'm not gonna talk about it. I really, because I
have
don't.
some feedback based on, experience. I have one who fought to get verification that he was actually providing social work practice, based on, our act, but we work for federal government, and he was in another position, and they would not allow him to receive supervision by me because they said he was not a social worker, but what he was doing was in alignment with the Social Work Practice Act, and as far as what he was doing. And so we had to get the board involved. He contacted the board as suggested by, and the board did, he sent out all his employment, what he did as far as the definition, all the description, and they approved it. And the board approved it. And so when we came back to our agency, the agency still said he was not a social worker. But eventually, after fighting, they allowed it, but now he is, because, the job he was doing, they had another job in the midst of this that he applied for, which is a social work job, so he sees now, but it's the idea that when they're in other roles,
Yeah.
but they're still providing social work, it's
So
hard
can
for the
you-
agency to, say yes.
This is Edgar, can you leave it to the backs to determine?
They did not leave it to me to determine.
No, I'm saying, can we, in the future, like, rewrite it where, so that's only for contract social workers, or federal and state, that can be contract?
This
Is
is
that
for
what we're
federal,
talking
yes,
Okay.
federal and state Kansas.
So if you're supervising this person, let's say I'm supervising somebody with one of these contracts, I should be able to look and see what you're doing, if it meets the qualifications of a social worker, you do, whether they call you that or not, if you're doing the work of a social worker, I should still be able to verify that. Can we do that, another attestation or something?
This is Angela. The thing I was saying is regardless if the BACS attest to it, it's up to the agency to approve. To say yes.
At
this
this
person-
point,
Yeah.
yeah, but if we change that. And if we say we're not gonna have the agency and the other contracts have to sign that we're gonna
Exactly.
test, can we do the same thing for that? That we.
So the agency would not actually be the one saying yes.
Right,
when we do
that we are testing that they're working, they have this contract, they work so many hours, they're doing social work.
Yes.
I mean, it'd be the same philosophy as what we're doing with the other.
So
Go ahead, Parker.
this is Parker. So in my situation, I told the supervisor that I couldn't attest to it until I talked to Regina about it, because I hadn't seen it before. And I know it happens, but my supervisor in that situation was ending his job and he had like 10 hours left of supervision, right? And so we were trying to finish the thing out. And so he was contracting to do some kind of training with the school system, right? And so he was a very industrious person, so he went and produced some documentation from the school system that yes, indeed, he's got this contract and he's doing this thing. And so I was not gonna go through that process without Regina. It was just way above whatever I had seen. And so I think it can be very complicated, this contract thing can get very complicated. How was I gonna know this particular program, the school system, the whole thing? How does that work? So,
This is Gina. It may be such a gray area that it should be a petition brought before the board to determine whether or not it constitutes social work. Some fast supervisors may not be comfortable with making that sort of a call, and by petitioning the board, it could provide a layer of protection for the fast.
yeah, I wasn't gonna sign off on it until I had a conversation with Regina, just to understand if it's, in her mind was something that was.
Okay, I think that this is an issue that we need to chew on. I think to what I'm hearing on this side of the room is that people may be uncomfortable with assuming that responsibility. And then I think that if it ever comes up, then it would probably have to come before the full board to determine whether or not it's within the scope, within the scope of practice. So I'm probably gonna like highlight that whole section in yellow and go back and look at it again, y'all. But I think that might be a bit much for that back just to chew on your own.
And so this is Parker again, it's a lot, and it does, it requires, I'm not, I'll assume the responsibility, but I have to have ways to verify.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's the thing. I mean, I have to know that my information is the right information.
And contracts, it's a stretch for contracts. Whenever you start talking about that, it becomes a little messy. That would definitely, I think, would have to go before the full board for consideration. But of course, All right, Angela, where we at? Okay, we close it up, wrap it up.
Okay, for record of supervision, most common problems was LMSW does not understand the invitation process. This will not be an issue in the new platform. LCSW banks enters the wrong number of hours or confirms too early. This will also not be an issue within the new platform. And I will definitely say sometime when you hit, clicking on the button, you mistakenly may hit confirm instead of continue, whatever the other button is. But it does at this time pop up and say, are you sure you want to confirm? But if you're not paying attention, you might hit it and you stuck. So you have to call and have it have that open up again, the log open up again, because you may be closing the log out. So that is an issue there. So if the new platform is, that's not gonna be an issue, that is wonderful, because I do see that as an issue. Time consuming for staff because each entry must be approved. This will not be an issue with the new platform either. So, Professional experience verification, the purpose of this is to have employer verify how many hours a person has worked for a specified period. We add the hours to verify LMSW has met the 3,000 hours. So the questions for consideration is it reasonable to have this as a paper form that gets completed by employer and uploaded by the BACS? The element, we already talked about that, elements that we can alter it before uploading.
I'm wondering if the platform would allow supervisors, when they enter their hours, give it a tally as you go. Like, it's already, this is the amount of hours, so the individual, Emily.
This is Emily. I just want y'all to make sure that you understand that record of supervision is recording your face-to-face contact with your supervisor. And we're looking for a total of 96 hours. Your professional experience verification, which is what she's on now, is what the employer tells us how many hours you worked. And that's how we know that you've met the 3,000 hours. And so we have to compare and make sure that the supervision contacts are occurring during the time that this employer says they were working this amount of time. And then also to make sure that we meet the other part of the statute, which says you can't get it done in less than 2 years or more than 4 years. Because some people they'll work, 60 hours a week. So they reach that 3,000 hours before they hit the 2-year mark, and then they try to apply, but if they're not eligible yet. So, yeah, so the reason why that question was in there is because with the new company that we're going with, if you don't have a license with the social work board, you can't log in to the system. So an agency supervisor that's an RN can't log into the system to verify anything. So either the BACS needs to verify how much time the person has worked, or the LMSW gets the employer to fill something out that says how many hours they worked, and then the BACS can upload it to the LMSW supervision record.
This is Parker, and we always did that through the HR of the supervisee, who it's tied to their paycheck. This is how many hours they were paid for, right? And I don't think it's a problem if we upload it, but for us to figure out 3,000 hours and like, oh, you had OT here, no, that's not. I think it's best in the agency in which they're working. I mean, uploading it is one thing. That's a scan and an upload, but that process, we're not,
Correct.
we can't do that. Well, I think we can.
And it brings to another point, is that if they leave one job, they're gonna have to do a final
Mhm.
Amount of numbers for that, 1,500 or whatever, and then
Right.
start another one,
Right.
So that, I think, it is it's challenging for us as BACS to try to sit here and calculate. All right, we're gonna table it, right? But keep it.
Yeah, what I want everybody's brains to be thinking about is how do we make the process easy to use and understand for both parties and still maintain the quality of supervision, the accountability of supervision, ensuring that the person is meeting what the Practice Act says someone has to meet to get their LCSW.
Yes.
So it's looking at that whole picture and determining, maybe there's a different way that we need to verify something. And how would we do that? So if you're, looking at other states and how they record supervision, is that one of their requirements, and how do they get that verified?
And I will, email that, and I guess we can table it to our next meeting and discuss that. And I will not just look at Texas, I'll look at neighboring states
Right.
and have.
And so that'll be add to the deliverables, Angela, what, Emily has brought to our attention, just really looking at what other states are doing, how they're recording their supervision and if that, who is responsible for doing that. Thank you for your report, on that, Angela. And thank you for your time. Thank you, staff, for all the work you've done too, as well as assisting with the platform. All right, so we're gonna go right on to Gina, and Gina's work on this as well. All right, and so let's go right on to Gina. Gina, let's go to your report.
Okay, I was tasked with looking at supervisor responsibilities, and
Discontinuation, yes, thank you.
so to start with 503C, this involves a supervision contract being submitted within 60 days of the first supervisory session. The issue here is it's not clear as to whose responsibility it is ultimately to ensure compliance with submitting the form within 60 days.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we've already addressed that earlier. Right now, the supervisor, supervisee, and agency supervisor sign. We also have it on the table to potentially remove the agency supervisor's signature and leave this contract between the supervisor, supervisee. So I think it needs to be clear whose responsibility it is to submit it.
To submit the supervision contract within the first
60 days.
60 days.
Continue.
Keep going, yeah.
Okay.
Keep going.
503H, well,
We've already pretty much.
yes.
So, just for the record, we kind of reviewed 503H last meeting.
Okay. 503I, I think is clear now because we have the supervisor maintaining the record. The next one is 503J. Supervisor keeps a supervision folder that contains the supervision contract, the evaluation of supervision, the record, memos and correspondence, the narrative of the sessions. The issue here is pertinent correspondence. I think would be a way of clarifying and clarifying what memos and correspondence should be maintained, considering the volume of emails and text messages now between the parties. I would recommend that. I also recommend that we put a time frame onto how long the record should be maintained.
Right, and that was what Edgar had brought up earlier. I think we all were talking about how long do we keep these records, once we're finished with the supervisee. I definitely don't think it should be 7 and 10 years like client records. I'm gonna tell you right now, I'm not in favor of holding on it for 7 years. So if we do decide, Gina, we need to decide collectively and then bring it before the board, a reasonable amount of time to keep a record.
So this is.
I would say 1 year at the end of it. I would literally say 1 year post the conclusion of the supervision.
I
That's
will
fine.
tell you one thing, though, that the supervisee has 4 years and they may change their
So 4 years
supervisor.
then.
So 4 years would make sense for the supervisee to be able to have access.
I'm okay with 4 years as well. I was just, because their person is still in supervision. But upon conclusion of the completion of the supervisory relationship, I don't want, so we need to have a conversation. Bottom line, when we're finished, I'm no longer your backs. How long should I hold on to this record?
Right.
You've applied to the board, you you meet the requirements, so how long should I hold on to this record? Particularly because the record is now in the platform.
Yeah.
That information is gonna be inside the platform, so we will need to decide what's best, so. Okay, thanks, Gina.
All right, and J also is termed supervision folder. We may want to replace the word folder with a file or
Yeah.
record or something that reflects our times to, because this record could be maintained electronically. Okay. The next one is 503K. These are professional responsibilities to honor the commitment to supervise.
Gina, I'm not sure if you're projecting very well. Can you just speak up just a little bit?
Sure. Okay. One of the professional responsibilities of the supervisor is to submit the forms on a timely basis. I suggest that we consider rewording as the supervisor is not responsible for completion or submission of all of the supervision forms. Like, for instance, the employment verification form is currently the responsibility of the supervisee. But the way it's worded now, it appears to put all of the responsibility for all of the forms towards the supervisor. So I think we need to have clarification.
So what's the recommendation? Just asking, when we say clarification, because whatever we leave with, if we decide upon it, of course, in our final report, will go to the full board. Is the recommendation to not, who to recommend? I'm asking that to the committee. What's the recommendation?
Okay. Mrs. Parker, that both the supervisee and the supervisor timely submit their responsible, maybe we outline what they are. It's a joint thing because we're not, as Gina was saying, we are oftentimes waiting on the supervisee to get the form to us, and we don't have control of that part, so they've got to be timely on theirs, and we've got to be timely on ours.
So you're saying a joint responsibility and outline, and this ties to LMSW responsibilities, right, Edgar? Outline what the requirements are for you, your responsibility, right, in this relationship. And letting them know what they are required to do in order for this relationship. Okay, so a joint responsibility I'm hearing.
With the detailed outline underneath, it says, these are your forms supervising,
Right.
these are your forms supervising.
And something, and this is Angela, and I agree with you saying, but I think it should be worded, the supervisee shall submit, the supervisor, and then bullet point exactly what
Yes.
each one should submit.
This is Gina, and I agree with you, Angela, because I too looked at some of the same forms you did, and it is extremely clear. Supervisor submits, supervisee submits.
Right.
So there's no question, and this ties back to the first thing with the supervision contract. We need to say who has to submit the forms.
Right.
Each form, that's the recommendation.
Question, are we going to put this in our rule, or is that going to be in a policy or process? You understand what I'm saying? So that's, two different things, right? If it's in the rule, so that's the conversation. Is it's going to be on the form, on the computer as a policy process, or do we need it in the rule? Look at
You need it in the rule.
We need it in the rule. Okay.
There's a lot of.
So the way Sherry explained policy versus rule, policy is something that you use internally, and a rule is something that you can hold somebody accountable to. And so that's one of the things that we've heard in the past. Well, I thought she was doing it. No, I told you to do it. And so it needs to be spelled out. And I would I have a meeting on Monday with Certami, so I kind of need covalent, excuse me. I kind of need to know, like, sooner rather than later what your recommendation is, because it could affect how the programming is done. And I don't want to have them program a certain way and then y'all come back with a different recommendation.
So to your point, Emily, if you can be specific with the committee and say, hey, y'all, this is what I need to have because I have a meeting on Monday. Because if you would have said that 45 minutes ago, we would have had, I'm telling you, we would have just been straight doing what you need for your Monday meeting. So I want to leave some space if we can. Because Gina is going through, in fact, she's almost, but I want to be able to give attention to your specific request if you need it in preparation for your meeting on Monday, okay? So Gina, let's go through. We don't have to do it all, because I do want to make sure she can, we can, avail some time for that too as well. Okay, so I'm hearing joint responsibility. I'm hearing we need to have it outlined, specific as to who's supposed to do what. And then your 503M.
One other thing on 503K, quarterly contact with the agency or administrative supervisor has been a recommendation previously. We continue to talk about this. We need to make a decision as to whether this is going to stay a recommendation or we want this contact with the agency supervisor to become a requirement. There's a lot of confusion about it. It used to be on the form where you're signing and it says we agree to maintain quarterly contact. Then it was removed from the form, but has still been considered a practice or a recommendation. So is it a recommendation or is it a requirement? We need to clarify.
That's a question. Quarterly contact with agency supervisor that is off-site. Is that going to be a requirement committee or a recommendation?
Mrs. Parker, I supervise off-site, and I feel like that should be a recommendation because we can do it. I mean, we can make it a requirement, but I call when we need to call. I call, I don't know. It just feels like
I
a lot.
agree, Parker.
I agree with
Recommendation, well, it is stay as that then. Okay. Well, it'll be, if that's the case, we have to entertain a motion for that.
I motion that it would be a recommendation to keep in contact with the off-site or on-site supervisor.
It's been moved by Edgar for the quarterly contact with the agency administrative supervisor via recommendation. It's been seconded by Angela. Any public comment pertaining to the motion on the floor? I will open up time for public comments, y'all, as we get to the end of the meeting, okay? But right now, I just need public comment for the motion that's on the floor.
So you'll need to ask the people that currently have their hand up to lower their hand so that we can identify who
So
has a public
individuals,
comment.
The motion on the floor that was made by Edgar was to, the quarterly contact that's made by the supervisors, be a recommendation and not a requirement. It was seconded by Angela. And now we're at the point of public comment. I am opening the floor for public comment only for this motion that's on the floor. So if you have your hand raised and you want to comment to something other than this motion, I'm asking you to lower your hand at this time. I will allow space for public comment pertaining to supervision committee, what we discussed, but right now it's only for that motion. So please lower your hand at this time if your comment is not for this motion that's on the floor.
Okay, so the two people that's had their hand up, it's still up, but a new hand is up. Shelley Weaver wishes to give a public comment.
Okay. And so we'll go in the order of the people that had their hands raised, and then we'll circle back and allow Shelley to jump on since she just raised hers. So the first who was that first person, Emily, that who had their hand raised?
Marcia Benz and Ruth Moore.
Hi, Marcia, you being recognized.
This Shelley, I've asked Shelley to unmute.
Who are you doing now? Who?
What I was trying to say is that Marcia Benz and Ruth Moore has had their hand raised for a while.
Okay,
When you called for public comment, it's for the motion that's on the floor,
okay.
which after when you called for that public comment, Shelley Weaver raised her hand. And Shelley, can you unmute?
Hey, good morning, everybody.
Can't hear you.
Hold on, I'm gonna turn her up.
Shelley, we can't hear you.
Okay.
It's coming through this instead of that. I don't know why. Let me just turn it up. Go ahead, Shelley.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yeah, to the best of our ability. Keep trying. We're really trying, but go ahead, Shelley. Can you hear us?
Okay. I just wanted to say, as president of NASW LA, this is something that we would support, is it to be a recommendation. So I do like the motion that's on the floor now. In light of upcoming legislation, possible changes to do virtual, I think it makes sense if the supervisor and supervisee live across the state. So thank you, everybody. Appreciate the work that you're doing.
Thank you, Shelley. She supports the motion for it to be a recommendation.
Oh, okay. All right. The other two individuals, that have their hand raised, is it pertaining to the motion on the floor? If not, please lower your hand.
All right, there's one hand still raised. Marcia Benz.
Hi, Marcia, you're being recognized. All right, okay, well, we don't hear from Marcia, so we're gonna go right on. The public comment is closed. Any objections or abstentions to the motion?
Oh, I'm sorry, Ruth Moore still has her hand raised. I apologize.
Okay, Ruth, you're being recognized. All right, the public comment is now being closed. Any objections or abstentions? Hearing none, motion carries. All right, let's see,
Hello,
Somebody's saying something.
Gina.
hi, this is Ruth Moore. It wasn't pertaining to the motion.
I'm sorry, y'all. Somebody is talking.
Oh, and we can't hear
Okay,
them.
I'm
Y'all gonna have
sorry.
to get closer.
We can't hear them.
Okay.
Who is speaking right now, please?
Oh, this is Ruth Moore. It wasn't pertaining to the motion, and I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not in here.
It's not, I think she says it's not. You're saying
Hello? It wasn't pertaining to the motion.
okay,
So,
I'm gonna
all
lower
right,
your hand
thank
for
you.
right now then.
Okay.
All right, yeah. So, does your 503M have anything to do with forms or information that, okay, so we'll table that, okay, like, I wanna be able to leave some space to just address some of the needs that Emily may have for that Monday meeting. So I'm gonna put table, because I tell y'all, we're gonna be working, we're gonna be one of those working committees. So we're gonna table that piece, okay, Gina, if that's all right with you.
507B,
Look at that.
and then the supervision got the last 2 points.
Let's put that 507B.
Bottom of page 2. I just have 2 points.
Oh, I see it. Go ahead, Gina.
507B, I suggest we add a statement about complying with the Practice Act, Code of Ethics, rules, regulations, etc. We don't have a statement as to the supervisor responsibilities to do so at this point. It's implied. And maintaining the LCSW, I suggest we add in good standing.